Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something pretty wild from the financial source Hidden Tax. We are looking at a staggering financial loophole. Part 1, the $39 trillion debt crisis. And, that massive principle compounds into a very immediate, very pressing liquidity nightmare. We're talking about an annualized interest expense that is rapidly approaching $1 trillion. Servicing this debt alone is chewing up a massive portion of tax revenues, creating a severe drag on fiscal flexibility. It's exactly this fiscal squeeze that sets the stage for a radical, highly unconventional mechanical loophole. Moving on to Part 2, Washington's $4 trillion lever. So the source poses a pretty provocative question here. Can the executive branch just print $4 trillion without ever asking Congress for permission? It sounds impossible, right? Well, while it completely defies conventional fiscal policy, Hidden Tax highlights a little-known statutory mechanism that completely circumvents Congress, allowing for unilateral executive action on the money supply. This hidden lever is known as a gold revaluation. Basically, it's a statutory loophole that allows the Treasury to artificially reprice all that physical gold sitting over at Fort Knox. Relying heavily on historical precedent, specifically echoing moves like the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the government can unilaterally adjust the face value of our national gold reserves. This effectively alters the monetary base, without any legislative friction whatsoever. No votes, no debates, just a stroke of a pen. Which brings us to Part 3, the $15,000 gold reset. CPA Bryan, the author behind Hidden Tax, really doesn't frame this as just some hypothetical whiteboard exercise. He treats it as an imminent reality. He states flat out, at Hidden Tax, we skip the economic theater. This could be the ultimate emergency bailout. He views this as a potent, highly deployable measure for a financial system under severe duress, treating it as a literal contingency plan rather than just a theory. Now, the whole core of this theory rests on a massive, almost unbelievable valuation gap. You see, officially, U.S. gold is still held on the books at a statutory value of just $42.22 an ounce. $42. But Hidden Tax proposes a dramatic reset price of $15,000 an ounce. The vast delta between that legacy book value from decades ago and the proposed reset is what drives this entire fiscal maneuver. It creates this immense pool of unrealized capital just sitting there waiting to be tapped. So how exactly does that gap get monetized? Well, here's the step-by-step playbook they lay out. Step 1. The Treasury officially resets gold to $15,000 an ounce. Step 2, the Federal Reserve steps in and credits the Treasury with newly printed currency matching that exact difference, effectively monetizing the unrealized gain by issuing gold certificates to the Fed. Step 3, this newly created capital sits right in the Treasury's general account. CPA Bryan calls this a debt-erasing miracle, which is basically a simple accounting stroke that unleashes a tsunami of massive capital into the system. In practice, this accounting shift generates a $4 trillion windfall out of thin air. It injects emergency liquidity straight into a government that is drowning in debt servicing costs. However, and this is a big however, Hidden Tax emphasizes that this fiat expansion is merely a band-aid. It buys time, sure. It keeps the sovereign debt engine humming for a little bit longer, but it offers absolutely no structural cure to the underlying fiscal deficit. It merely extends the timeline before the fundamental debt must actually be reckoned with. And finally, Part 4. Building your financial fortress. Look, you can't just inject $4 trillion into the system without causing some serious macroeconomic shockwaves. The source explicitly warns that revaluing Fort Knox's reserves radically expands the monetary base without any corresponding increase in actual economic output. That presents immediate, massive inflation risks and seriously threatens the purchasing power of the US dollar. CPA Bryan views this impending maneuver as a flashing red siren to shift into defensive posturing way before consumer prices absorb the shock. Because this shift could literally happen overnight, the source is advising immediate action. CPA Bryan urges, don't wait for the reset to act. Protect your financial fortress by owning real assets they can't print. The whole goal here is to position your portfolio defensively ahead of fiat currency dilution, ensuring that your wealth is anchored securely before that newly minted capital floods the market. So, to survive what he calls the great debt revaluation, the directive from Hidden Tax is crystal clear. Ignore the daily economic theater and start building an insurance policy portfolio. According to the source, this requires a heavy allocation into unprintable, tangible assets. We're talking things like physical precious metals, real estate, and hard commodities. By anchoring your money to hard assets, you keep the math in your favor, and you insulate your wealth from the systemic fallout of arbitrary monetary expansion. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. Is the $15,000 gold reset just some obscure hidden accounting trick from the past? Or is it the ultimate emergency bailout waiting in the wings to be deployed? Given the immense, crushing pressure of our $39 trillion national debt, extreme measures might just no longer be off the table. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.